Hey everyone, I am back. My name is Kai Chimura, and it has been quite a long time since I have done an episode of the Soccerpedia podcast. But here I am enjoying summer vacation. And in this episode, we got a very frequent guest in Jason Longshore to feature in this podcast. Jason is a color commentator for Atlanta United, which is a Major League Soccer team in the United States. And he also is works for 92.9 The Game, which is a radio station that covers the Atlanta United matches. And I think this is Jason's sixth appearance on the podcast. And today we are going to talk about the 2023 Women's World Cup that will be held in Australia and New Zealand. So hopefully you enjoy. Hey, how's it going, Jason? Oh, you're muted.
All right, try again. Hey,
Oh
what's
yeah,
up?
how's it going?
Good. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, I think I was looking back on it. I think this is your sixth appearance on the Soccerpedia podcast, and I have not done any new episodes in a little while. And I thought, you know what? I'm on summer vacation. Let's see what we can talk about. And I'm like, oh yeah, Women's World Cup is coming up in less than 24 hours. So, or I think it's tomorrow. I think that it starts. Australia and New Zealand's kind of far away, so had to adjust to the time. Uh,
Yeah, the time zones are a little crazy, and the game times are a little
yeah,
crazy. They're kind of spread out all over the place rather than very specific windows.
yeah, it's like you see it's some 3 a.m. games, 5 a.m., and then the only ones I can feasibly probably watch are some of the 9 p.m. games. Like, okay, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, let's talk about the 2023 Women's World Cup. Figured we could just do a kind of a group by group preview, kind of talk about who some of the favorites are, how the breakdown of the knockouts will go potentially, and just the overall vibe of this tournament. This is the first time that the Women's World Cup, will feature 32 teams. They have expanded it from 24 the previous couple editions. So we got quite a bit of a few teams that are going to make their debut at this World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. And it's also the first time that the Women's World Cup will be co-hosted by two countries, which will be interesting. So yeah, let's talk about the groups. So Group A features one of the co-hosts, New Zealand, as well as Norway, Philippines, and Switzerland. The Philippines are making their debut in the Women's World Cup. So Jason, what's your take on this group?
Norway should win it. They should be the favorite by a pretty wide margin. The question will be New Zealand and Switzerland, Philippines being in their first tournament. It's always a challenge, and I think it's something that will be part of this World Cup where you're going to see some score lines that aren't pretty. And we've seen it before, but it's part of the process, I think, of expanding the tournament to where you raise the overall level. And along the way, you have some teams that struggle in their first time in the tournament. Philippines could be that team. New Zealand has never won a World Cup game. They've been there before. They are solid. And I think between them and Switzerland, it's going to be a really tough one to call. That game when they play will probably decide who goes second in the group. Norway should win the group. This is a good Norway team. I think maybe right below the tournament contenders. Maybe right below that. I mean, you never know. That's the thing
Yeah.
about this tournament to me is it's so open that like I wouldn't have them in my top 5 favorites, but are they in the top 10? Yeah, they're gonna be in the mix. So them winning the group, that should happen.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I don't know. Maybe the home field advantage helps New Zealand a little bit, but this is a team that just really hasn't been there before at this level and in these kinds of pressure packed situations. And Switzerland's going to have a little more experience than them.
Yeah, it seems like one thing about the Philippines, which was very interesting, is I was looking over their roster, and about 17 of their players are born in the United States and have some
Mhm.
sort of uh, Division One NCAA college experience. So that might help help them as far as some of the infrastructure of soccer for this Philippines side, and a few of them do play in some of the kind of the middle tier European leagues. So I don't think the Philippines will be. I mean, they will have I think they'll have a tough time, but I don't see them getting 10-0 drubbings by any of these teams. I think they'll have the physicality to at least hang in there. They might be able to, they might be able to spring a surprise here or there potentially. What do you think about?
Potentially, yeah, potentially, I think is the key word there. It's such a big ask to be in this tournament for the first time and be competitive. And that's the challenge. I mean, that's the growing pains, I think, for the tournament. That's the thing about getting these teams up to the point that they can compete better next time. You look at their recent results. I mean, you're comparing it to, the games that they've played lately, and go back to May. It's been against Vietnam. It's been against Malaysia. It's
Mhm.
been against Myanmar. They've played Hong Kong. They've played Tajikistan, Pakistan. Um, they lost narrowly to Scotland back in February of this year.
Mhm.
That's that's really it. Iceland beat them 5-0 in February as well. Um, it's a big jump.
Yeah.
It's a big jump. We'll see if they can hang around and be competitive. The question is just always like, can you get a little bit of momentum?
Mm.
And if you can show well in game one,
Mhm.
however, it's against
Yeah.
Switzerland,
That's
which won't be easy.
Yeah. And Switzerland's one of those. It seems like Switzerland's one of those developing nations in European soccer. They have a few like really standout players like Leah Walti and Ramona Bachmann. And I figured that Switzerland could potentially grow into one of those top 10 teams in the world in the next few years. And I think if also with the Philippines having a majority American born team, they might be able to grow more of a depth pipeline in the future as well. So I don't think this will be the last time we'll see a Philippines in the World Cup for the women's side, at least.
No, no, and I think with the tournament growing, you're gonna see countries emerge. It's about the investment is what it comes down to, and that'll be a recurring theme as you go through some of these countries. You have some that have started to invest in the women's game, and you're seeing that pay off. A team like Portugal, for example.
Mhm.
And then there's countries that, either have made it and aren't getting the investment, and it's hard
Mhm.
for them to maintain it. Jamaica can be one of those. Some of the South American countries, you've got to see more investment
Yeah.
to get to that point. Switzerland's kind of in the middle. Like
Yeah.
it's a country and a league and a federation that is solid when it comes to European football. But when you look at the infrastructure that some other countries have in the women's game, they just have better development pathways for their players.
Yeah.
And I think the best Swiss players have to leave the country and go elsewhere at younger ages to get to that next level.
Yeah. And I think, and the one thing about this tournament, because it's expanded to 32 teams in the past, this might be kind of a crutch against New Zealand or Switzerland, is that in the past, when it was just 24 teams, that there was a few of those third place teams that could
Yeah.
have advanced to the round of 16. But now with a group, a 32 team tournament, it's just the top two only that will advance. There's no longer any third place teams that might get lucky enough to move on to the next round. So that might be, prevent some of those teams that in the past that might have relied on getting that third place team finish and then moving on. Now that's no longer available for them.
Yeah, it comes down to the Switzerland New Zealand game in
Mhm.
this group for me. I think Norway will win the group, and the last game of the group stage will be Switzerland New Zealand.
Mhm.
For both of those teams, it's down to don't lose points against the Philippines. Try to get some goal differential there. If either one can get anything off of Norway, then they'll be in the pole position going into that game, and they'll only need a draw. I think it's going to come down to New Zealand at home having to beat Switzerland on the final day, and I don't think they can pull that off. I think it's going to be Switzerland and Norway that gets out of the group.
Okay. And would you say that the key player in this group overall, or one of the players to look for, is Ada Hegerberg for Norway?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're talking about one of the best players in the world. She didn't play in the last
Mhm.
World Cup. Norway, in terms of when you get later in the tournament and being able to be a title
Mhm.
contender, they'll go as far as she can carry them.
Yeah. And speaking of the title contenders, Norway did win the Women's World Cup back in '95, I believe. So there is some, prestige in that program. So I think for Norwegian fans, anything, I mean, they hope to expect a pretty deep run as far as their expectations.
Yeah, the women's game is really different than it was in 1995. And that's the exciting thing about it is, I mean, back in the day, the Scandinavian teams,
Mhm.
the US and
Canada.
China
Mhm.
were the top
Yeah.
teams. And now you see that difference. I mean, China is a team that's borderline to get out of their group here in the World Cup. The Scandinavian teams, I think Sweden is the better one of the Scandinavians. I think they can go further than Norway. And there's others that have
Mhm.
emerged, like England, like
Mhm.
France, like Germany. Um, so many different
Oh, yeah.
contenders in this tournament.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to Group B. It seems, at least on paper, that Group B is kind of this group of death. That there's not really. I mean, yeah, I mean, you have the other co-hosts in Australia, but you also have debutants, Republic of Ireland. You have Nigeria, which is considered one of the better or best African women's teams for quite a while. South Africa has caught up in a way with Nigeria, but they're still very, very well in the African Confederation. And then you also have Canada, which a couple of years ago won the the gold medal in the Olympics in Tokyo. But in this group, it seems like there's not really. I mean, even if Ireland is in their debut World Cup, it doesn't, on paper, then they have plenty of quality players that they're not going to be pushovers by any stretch of the imagination, I don't think.
No, they won't be. I think this group it sets up to be Australia and Canada to get through. I think Australia has an absolute pathway to get to the final at home with the crowds they're going to draw. Sam Kerr being one of the best players in the world. I think Australia can go a long way in this tournament. Canada will be right there with them, though. What's crazy is whoever comes in second in this group, you're likely looking at a matchup with England in the round of 16, which is
Mm-hmm.
a really difficult matchup for either Canada or Australia if that's where it falls. But I don't think it's an easy walk for either one of them. Nigeria and Ireland will push them, but I
Mm-hmm.
think the level of quality between Australia and Canada versus Nigeria and Ireland is far enough that the favorites should go through. And whichever one is in first, I think that's a really important spot here, not just to get out of the group, but to win the group to
Mm-hmm.
avoid England in the round of 16.
Yeah, and some of that will, I mean, if Australia, Canada being the top, I guess the two favorites from this group, this could come down to just goal differentials, some of these tiebreakers, see how they might fare against Ireland and Nigeria. Ireland possesses a few good players like Denise O'Sullivan and Katie McCabe making their, well, of course, their debuts as well, but especially for Denise O'Sullivan, I know was a few days ago she got hurt in one of the scrimmage games against Colombia, but it does look like she will be able to play in the World Cup, which is good news for Ireland. But I could see, I mean, Nigeria, they possess. I mean, they were able to. I think they were able to make it to the round of 16 in the last World Cup, and they possess one of the best strikers in the world right now, Assisat Ashola, who plays for SC Barcelona. So, she might be able to spring a few surprise goals against Canada and Australia's defense if they, don't take them seriously. So, this.
These are two teams that'll definitely, they're not going to overlook Nigeria or Ireland in these situations. They're going to get tested, but Canada and Australia are better teams
Hmm.
and they should get through. Upsets happen and it's easy I think to throw out like, well this could be an upset, this could be an upset and not track it. Like Canada and Australia should win these games. They
Mhm.
should be first and second. And then I think what's interesting is you get to that final day. where it is Canada and Australia on the last day.
Mhm.
And Australia with the home field advantage, I think will be such a big factor for them. I think New Zealand, like I mentioned in Group A, like it'll help them, and I
Mhm.
think they'll be competitive to get out of the group. Australia, it could push them from being a team that might be a second place finisher in a group
Mhm.
to winning the group
Mhm.
and getting those first two games under your belt against the two teams that you should beat in
Mhm.
Ireland and Nigeria should give them a lot of confidence going into game 3. I think it's Australia winning the group and Canada second.
Yeah. And part of when with the Australian home crowd does I was looking at the reports that Australia, I mean, not surprised by it, that they're selling more tickets than New Zealand is. So I figure
Oh yeah.
Australia is going to have a better home field advantage situation for them compared to New Zealand. So they'll have the crowd behind them for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's just the size of the
Yeah.
country and
Yeah.
and I think the quality of
Yeah.
the team and the expectations. I mean, Australia is a team that can get to the final. New Zealand is a team that would be ecstatic to get out of the group.
Or get their first win, I guess.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm kind of surprised by that. I mean, I would have figured that at least New Zealand would have been able to have one win in their history, but I was
Nope.
looking back on no, not at all. But all right, let's move into Group C. It features Spain, Costa Rica, Zambia, which is making their Women's World Cup debut, and former Women's World Cup champion Japan, who won it back in 2011. This is going to be interesting. Spain has seems like they are a team in the women's game that is on the rise. FC Barcelona is one of the best women's club teams in the world right now. But I know recently they have had some turmoil in the Confederation. Quite a few of their players boycotted the coach or had some problems with the coach, but the Spanish Federation backed the coach, and he's still coaching the team now. And if it seems like a few of those players that initially had protested against coach are back. A few of them
Right.
have either been omitted or retired from the national team since. But on paper, it looks like this is Spain's group to win, even though Japan does possess some history to try to compete. But I don't think that Japan is as strong as they were a decade ago. And then you got Zambia, who is on the rise, and a young player named Barbara Banda, who's been cooking lately. So what's your take on this group?
I think Japan's solid. I think they'll get out of the group. I don't know how far they'll go, but I think they're very solid. Spain is the volatile one here. Spain is a team that can win the World Cup. Spain is also a team that could collapse under that turmoil, like you talk about, and flop. They have the potential to go either way. I think ultimately talent will get them through and they will win the group. Alexia Putellas, one of the top players in the world, Hermoso up top. Great players. They should get it done. Zambia is the wild card.
Mm.
This is a team that went to Germany and beat them this
Yeah,
month in a World Cup friendly,
yeah.
in a World Cup warm up friendly. Banda is an outstanding player.
Hmm.
I don't think they have enough around her to advance, but if either Spain or Japan slip up, Zambia would be the one to take advantage. I think Costa Rica will be a hard team to break down. I think they'll be very defensive, but I don't think they're going to be able to truly compete.
Yeah, and they no longer have Shirley Cruz Tanya, who has been a stalwart for this Costa Rican side for a long time, but she was not picked for this World Cup. And so it does seem like Costa Rica doesn't really have the any real star power on this team to really pose a significant threat to Spain, Japan, and possibly even Zambia. That's probably the only team that Costa Rica could maybe muster a point or a potential win against. But yeah, Zambia is going to be very interesting. I think, yeah, Barbara Banda, she's been scoring a lot of goals for this Zambian side, and I would definitely like to see her play in one of the top leagues in the women's game somewhere. I think she deserves it.
Yeah. I think she's one who could really parlay this tournament into a bigger move. Um, I think Spain wins the group. I think Japan will be a solid second place.
Mhm.
Zambia is just the one. I mean, they're going to come in with so much confidence after beating Germany, who is a contender to win the thing.
Yeah.
Um, they're going to come in with so much confidence and they're going to be fearless. I do think they're going to give up too many goals, and that's
Mhm.
probably going to ultimately be what punishes them. But if you're looking for a underdog to watch, I think the games will be very entertaining because I think they're going to be high scoring with
Mhm.
Zambia.
Yeah. Yeah. And Zambia, I know, I think they qualified for the Olympics last time around. And I
Mhm.
remember seeing some of their score lines, and they were, even though they got shattered by the Netherlands, they were still, even Barbara Banda mentioning her again, she scored a hat trick in that game. So
Yeah.
they are definitely capable of scoring goals. But yeah, their defense is going to be a kind of a question mark point, I think, for this Zambian side.
Yeah, they've got to beat Costa Rica and they've got to steal at least a point somewhere else to have a chance.
Mm-hmm. Let's move into Group D. You have England, who won the women's Euros last year. You also have Haiti making their debut in the Women's World Cup. You have Denmark, and you also have China, who historically has been one of the better women's sides. They haven't really made much noise in the past decade or so, but they are there. England, they are missing quite a few key players in this World Cup through injury. And I think this is kind of seems like an overall theme for this Women's World Cup is that there are quite a few teams that are not at full strength because of various injuries. I mean, but that happens at every single tournament regardless. But it seems like this is, saw recently some sort of post about kind of this starting lineup of injured players in the bench for the women's side, and it is very stacked up and sad how many quality players are not going to be able to play in this World Cup through injury. England has several of these players that are not going to be able to play, unfortunately. But does that hurt England's chances to do well in this tournament, Jason?
It could. I mean, I think the question's going to be in the back without Leah Williamson. That's the one that's hard to replace. And England's got to take advantage of a group where they should be able to cruise to winning it. And they've got to get their center back pairing, whatever that's going to be. They've got to get them 270 minutes. And I know a lot of times you want to rotate people in a game in the group if you can, if you're expected to go through. England needs as many minutes as possible for that starting center back duo because that's the one that's the hardest to replace. And if they can get that right and build as the tournament goes on, England can win the tournament. England can absolutely win the tournament. They've got a good mix of youth and up and coming players with veterans around them to help ground things. Lucy Bronze is still one of the best players in the world. Ella Toone, I thought, was outstanding in the Euros. Lauren James is another one who just gives you something special off the bench, maybe as a starter. I think this is an England team that should be expecting a long stay at the World Cup, but they've got to get the defense right without Williamson.
Mm-hmm. And with Haiti making their debut, it's kind of a similar story with Zambia that they don't really possess a whole lot of quality outside of one or two really good players. For Zambia, they had Barbara Banda. For Haiti, their key player is going to be Nerelia Mondesir, who has been doing really well for Montpellier in the French Women's League, and she's already got 18 goals in 16 appearances, and kind of an Atlantic connection. Haiti does also have Danielle Etienne, who is Derek Etienne's sister. She is going to play in this Haitian side for the Women's World Cup. What's your take on Haiti in this group?
They're, you hate to say just happy to be there, but they are happy to be there. And it is part of the story of getting there the first time and learning what this level is like. And it's going to be a real challenge for Haiti. And if they can get a point out of this tournament, it would be just an incredible accomplishment and something that would go down in history. But to get out of the group is asking too much. I think this one's a pretty clear group and that England should win it. Denmark should be second. I don't think China is competitive enough. The game, that will be maybe the most interesting is China and Haiti because that is an opportunity, although it's against a team that has done well in this tournament in the past. It's an opportunity for Haiti to get points at the World Cup. And that's the one that I think when you get into these situations, and of course you're going to say all the right things and say, we expect to compete and yada yada. Like the reality is that game should be the one that is, circled for Haiti, and they need to get something out of that. That would be an amazing building block for them when you look ahead to the next World Cup and you look ahead to future CONCACAF events.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, just looking at the recent FIFA rankings, I know FIFA rankings doesn't really mean a whole lot, but as far as like rankings, I mean, Denmark and China are only separated by one spot. Denmark's at 13, China's at 14. So I mean, I think the battle for second place could be very interesting between Denmark and China to, make it.
It's possible. I think when you look at like the odds of qualification, FanDuel Sportsbook, it's a pretty big gap between Denmark and China. Denmark minus 350 expected to advance. China plus 240. Like it's not unheard of, but it is a big ask. I think the rankings are closer than maybe the quality of the rosters would appear.
Okay. So your take, England in first and Denmark second out of the group.
I think so.
I think it's very I would have probably agreed with that as well. Let's move into Group E, where you have back-to-back champions, United States, ranked number 1 in the world, with debutantes Vietnam, ranked 32nd. You got Netherlands, ranked number 9, who the U.S. beat in the final in the last World Cup. And then you also have debutantes Portugal, ranked 21st in the rankings. The U.S., just like England, they are missing a couple of crucial players like Becky Sauerbrunn, Kristen Press is out. Mallory Swanson is out as well through injury. What is your take on the U.S.? I know pretty much on paper they are expected to win.
They're expected to win the group. I don't know if I'd say they're expected to win the tournament. I think this is the most competitive one for the U.S. because of some of those questions. Without Sauerbrunn in the back, it's kind of the same thing as with England, although I think the U.S. knows that they're going to play Alana Cook and Naomi Girma as those two center backs. So they just need the experience. They just need games. I think the most important player for the U.S. is Julie Ertz.
Mm-hmm.
I think you've got to have Julie Ertz on the field in the big games. And she's still getting back to full fitness, full form. You've got to use the group stage as an opportunity to get there with her. I think the difference, like I said, with England, you got to play their center backs to get time and build chemistry. With Ertz, you've got to ramp her up and have her hitting on all cylinders when you get to the knockout games. So if that means kind of ramping up her time playing, figuring out where you're actually going to fit her. I mean, I think it's going to be a midfield with her and Horan and Lavelle. You might need Ertz in the back. If one of your center backs and Cook and Gurma are both young, if one of them falters, you're going to have to turn to Julie Ertz as a center back more than likely. So you got to have that in your back pocket too. The other thing is the attacking trio. I don't think it's necessarily defined between, Alex Morgan, Sophia Smith, Trinity Rodman, Lynn Williams, Alyssa Thompson. Megan Rapinoe is going to play significant minutes, maybe not as a starter. That's 6 players for 3 spots.
Yeah.
You could play Lavelle in that attacking trio as well if you wanted to. You could play Horan. So you've got some flexibility, but the lineup isn't really defined like maybe it has been in previous tournaments. So I think the tournament lays out really well for the U.S. because it's a group that they should be able to manage. They get a good test against the Netherlands in the second game. And then, I mean, when you start looking at the brackets and how things can fall, it's a manageable pathway. It's not as difficult as the other side of the bracket where, you're going to have a lot of top teams grouped together. And for the U.S., you're going to have some manageable games until you get to the quarterfinal, semifinal. So they have to build during the tournament. They have to sort out that attacking trio. You got to get Julie Ertz ready to go for the big games and figure out if your center backs, Cook and Gurma, are the right two.
And I mean, the Netherlands, they will be without one of their key players, Vivian Miedema, through injury. So Netherlands, I mean, they will still pack a punch. I do think they're not as strong as they were 4 years ago at the Women's World Cup. But that'll be a good test for the U.S. Vietnam making their debut. They're one of two Southeast Asian teams with the Philippines making their debut. Vietnam does have one player that plays abroad in Portugal, but I do not think that they will really pose too much of a threat to either three of those teams in the group. Portugal will be interesting. They are a team that seems like they're in the upwards trajectory. Started to build a domestic league in Portugal with a lot of players playing for Benfica. But what do you think on Portugal's chances, at least to spring a surprise?
Portugal could, because I think the Netherlands are vulnerable. I think without Miedema, they're not quite the same.
Mm-hmm.
On talent, they should get through. It should be the U.S. and the Netherlands, but Portugal is a team to watch. And look, it's a team that, and this is going to be the case with a lot of teams in this tournament. Once you get past the main contenders, there's a lot of unknowns,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of unknowns for people who exclusively cover the women's game, let alone, people who are kind of trying to get to know these teams. Portugal's a team that can be absolutely competitive. The question is just, can they handle the challenge?
Mm-hmm.
Can they handle that challenge? And that's game one for them against the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you look at how tournaments lay out, you look at where that game's going to fall, that key game in your campaign. And for Portugal, the key game is against the Dutch. It's unfortunate for them that it's the first game,
Mm-hmm.
because if they come out a little slow in the tournament and they don't get 3 points out of that game, it's going to be a lot harder for them to advance. They should get 3 against Vietnam. Portugal's not going to expect to get anything against the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
If they get 3 there, then the Dutch are really scrambling. And then that second game for the U.S. and the Netherlands gets really, really interesting, because the Dutch are going to have to take some serious chances.
Yeah.
That's the fascinating element of this group. I think the U.S. will get through. I have picked Portugal to get through just because I think the Dutch will struggle
Mm-hmm.
without Miedema. I think they will start slow. Portugal will take advantage.
Mm-hmm.
But Portugal's got to get 3 points in first game. If they don't, they're not going to advance.
All right. Let's move into Group F. You have France, Jamaica, Brazil, and Panama. Panama making their first appearance in the World Cup. It's kind of interesting to see 2 CONCACAF teams in the same group. That's very rare for that to happen outside of UEFA teams. But you have, at least on paper, France and Brazil favorites to move on. Jamaica is making their second appearance at the World Cup, but they do possess a few good players. Khadija Shaw is considered one of the best strikers in the world right now. And what do you think of this group? Does it seem pretty clear cut, or could Jamaica or Panama pose any threat?
It's absolutely clear cut. And I will be rooting for Jamaica and Panama, rooting for Team CONCACAF, especially Jamaica with Soleil Washington from
Oh, yeah.
Chambly High School making the roster, one of the younger players in the tournament. Exciting to see her as part of this. Jamaica and Panama both are federations, especially Jamaica, because we've seen what their players have said about promises not being lived up to by the federation, camps not being done in the manner that they should be, not getting as many games to prepare. These are things that, are still part of the growing pains with the women's game in a lot of different countries, and it's something that has to improve. The pressure has to keep being placed on these federations to make that improve.
Mm-hmm.
But it's awesome for Jamaica to get to back-to-back tournaments. It's awesome for Panama to get here.
Mm-hmm.
But they are gigantic underdogs against 2 teams that can win the World Cup. I think Brazil is better than they've been in a while. They finally have a supporting cast around Marta, some young talent coming through, and Brazil will be one to watch as they grow into the tournament. France is a team that is a little bit of a conundrum in that, you go back to 2019 where they were at home, and I think they were disappointing. And you look at the turmoil that they've dealt with, and coach was finally let go after Wendy Renard said she was going to leave the national team. She's back in place. You bring over Hervé Renard from the Saudi Arabian men's national team from the past World Cup. He's not going to know this group all that well. But he's been in that situation before. He's a manager who has been a little bit of a nomad.
Yeah.
So he's going to understand the tournament aspects of this, if not his team and all the buttons he can push with the players that he has. France and Brazil have too much talent not to get out of the group, though. I
Yeah.
think it's a toss-up between who wins the group.
Hmm.
And again, in that side of the bracket, winning the group is going to be very, very important to avoid matchups down the line.
Hmm. And of course, this will probably be Marta's last World Cup.
Yeah.
I mean, she could potentially. I mean, I think she's like 38, 37
37,
right
I
now.
think.
So I mean, yeah, I mean, she could she go a Formiga route and play in her 40s? Maybe. But I think that's one thing for she's been on the scene for a couple of decades at this point, and that Women's World Cup is one thing that is still is up for grabs for her career, being one of the greatest women's players of all time. So that'll be interesting how she will do. She and Brazil will do too.
I don't know if she was going to come back unless I think she saw what
Yeah.
this team could be. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you go back to what she said last World Cup when she was leaving, it felt like a goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the young players in this
Yeah.
group have kind of energized her, and she
Mm-hmm.
sees that, hey, this could be the group that gets it done.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to see it. I want to see how Brazil does. I want to see how they use her. Does it turn into a situation like we've seen with Messi in Argentina, where it turns from the young players around her, like waiting for her to fix everything, to the point that they're playing for her
Yeah.
and really trying to lift her up? I think that's where they could be. And
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be the challenge for them to get there. France will be a tough test for them, but I think Brazil's a team that can go a long way.
Yeah. Let's move into Group G. You have Sweden, South Africa, Italy, and Argentina. On paper, this seems like a kind of a group of life outside of Sweden. Sweden seems to be historically very good, but they have not yet won the Women's World Cup. So it kind of seems like they are the bridesmaid and not the bride at the World Cup historically. But it seems like on paper that they are somewhat of an aging squad that is still kind of in this weird transitional phase of still keeping some key veteran players that's been at the World Cup quite a few times. But they seem like they should win the group. But you got some teams like South Africa, Italy, Argentina. South Africa is a lower ranked team out of those three just said, but it kind of seems like second place in this group is kind of up in the air. It's kind of tough to tell.
Sweden will win the group. I do think second place is a toss-up. Italy has, I think, slid backwards a little bit since
Yeah.
the last World Cup. Argentina is a team on the rise. South Africa is a team on the rise. The question is just going to be, and I think it's similar to what we saw going into the Men's World Cup, where teams like South Africa, like Zambia, they haven't faced. We talked about the Asian teams too.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't faced a lot of teams from outside of their confederation over the past cycle. They haven't played the big European teams on a regular basis. They haven't played the US and Canada on a regular basis. So they haven't been tested against teams that aren't like them. They haven't been tested against different styles of play. So that's a huge challenge. I think Italy is vulnerable, though. I think Argentina gets second in the group. I think Sweden wins it. Sweden is a team that they've been so close.
Mm-hmm.
They were the silver medal at the last Olympics, losing to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
They got beat badly by England in the Euros last year, but this is a team with Rolfo up top, with Aslani, ton of talent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a team in my mind to really, really watch for. They're on the side of the bracket with the US,
Yeah.
which is the easier side of the bracket, and they're separated. Like that would be the semifinal if they both win their group and they both get to the semifinal. It would be USA Sweden, and we know Sweden's had the US's number over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be a really difficult semi for the US. And I think Sweden has a pathway to get there, which wouldn't be asking them to play over their heads. I think Sweden is a team that if you're looking for somebody that might not be rated as highly as some of the favorites, but could make a deep run, the two that I keep coming back to are Sweden and Australia. So I think Sweden's going to be a team to watch in this tournament.
All right. And then looks like on my screen it says I have about a minute or 40 seconds remaining on this. So it's like I gotta upgrade my Zoom at some point. But if it does run out, do you mind if I send you another Zoom link? If
Yes.
that works? Cool.
That's fine.
Actually, let's let me go ahead and do that
Yeah.
now. So let me send you. I'll send you a link on Facebook, and then we'll continue this conversation. That's cool.
Got it.
Cool. Thanks. Sorry about that.
All good.